Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the PancChat Podcast. This is a podcast about the challenging and awful disease of pancreatic cancer. This podcast is actually a continuation of the Twitter chat on pancreatic cancer that began in 2016 and has now evolved into this podcast. I'm your host, Alisyn Camerota. I'm a longtime television journalist. You may recognize me from my decade at CNN, primarily on the morning show, or perhaps you recognize me from Fox or NBC or a variety of other places. I've been asking questions for a long time, and I'm glad to be able to put my interviewing skills to use on this very important subject. It's a subject I'm painfully familiar with. My incredible husband, Tim, died 9 months ago from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was the healthiest 56-year-old anyone had ever seen when he was incidentally diagnosed 2 years before he died. Needless to say, I'm still reeling from this loss. It'll be good for me, and I hope for all of you as well, to try to get some answers and to learn about any progress being made. So let me introduce our first guests. We have Cindy Gavin. She's the CEO and co-founder of Let's Win Pancreatic Cancer. And we also have Julie Fleshman. She's the president and CEO of Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, which is also known as PanCAN. Okay, so this first episode focuses on the impact of advocacy on this deadly cancer. I want to thank our sponsor, Revolution Medicines, for their contribution to the field as well as to this conversation. So let me introduce our first guests. We have with us Cindy Gavin, CEO and co-founder of Let's Win Pancreatic Cancer. We also have Julie Fleshman, president and CEO of Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, also known as PanCAN. Ladies, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, Cindy, let me start with you. Just bring us up to speed. What is the history of PancChat?
Sure. So before we get started, I do want to say thank you for agreeing to be our host of this important initiative. I'm always awed by someone that turns such a painful personal experience into something so meaningful for others. So thank you for being you and for bringing your expertise to our audience. And to Julie, who's the pioneer in the pancreatic cancer advocacy space, it is an honor to be your partner in this important initiative. So we launched a PancChat back in April of 2016, and it was a Twitter chat, and it was a collaboration between Celgene, Let's Win, PanCAN, and the Lustgarten Foundation. And the goal was every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m., we would have a chat, and everybody would know the topic, and we would come prepared, and we would discuss topics like risks and symptoms, the latest research, clinical trials, genetic testing, and so much more. And over the 9 years, we had 116 chats with over 11,000 global participants. So it was an incredible run, but in the last year, we've thought about sort of the platform and the transition from Twitter to X, and we've decided that it was time for us to move on to the next iteration, which is now going to be the PancChat Podcast. So thank you both for agreeing to be part of it.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate that and all of your kind words. And I'm happy to be able to use the expertise that I've developed through this, challenge to be able to have this conversation, because so many people need information. And I think that this video podcast is the perfect evolution for this, but you guys have been talking about this topic for such a long time. So quickly, tell me the connection between Let's Win and this.
Sure. Let's Win actually launched right about the same time. And we've established ourselves as a go-to resource for patients and families to get the best treatment options for pancreatic cancer. So our late co-founder, Ann Glauber, when she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreas cancer, she was told to immediately get her affairs in order. And she went to the internet, and there was a dearth of information. And organizations like PanCAN and Lustgarten and so many others were investing so heavily in research, yet she saw this unmet need where She as a PR professional, she wanted to make sure that patients had access to the latest treatment options. So she partnered with Carrie Kaplan from the Lustgarten Foundation, Dr. Alison Ocean, her oncologist, and her dear friend, Willis Shalit. And the goal was to publish new science-based content every 3 business days. I thought these ladies were crazy. I said, new science every 3 days. I said, listen, I'll help you get your project off the ground, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. I am proud to say that 9 years later, we have published nearly 1,000 unique articles on the latest science, clinical trials, and the voice of the patient. Everything's medically vetted. Everything is in English and Spanish. And we've covered the work of over 225 medical professionals from over 110 institutions. And we've shared the work of 15 advocacy groups so we can help patients get all the amazing resources that are available. We also have over 200 patient stories and nearly 100 videos of 5+ year long-term survivors. So we have accumulated an enormous amount of content. What I'll say is about 1.5 years ago, I, sort of had this moment where I said, well, this is great. Lots of content. We keep publishing. There's so much available that we can really get more information to patients. But it feels very overwhelming. So about 1.5 years ago, we sort of had a hard look at the way, we get the information to patients. So now when they come to the Let's Win site, instead of seeing different topics that they need, they actually can see themselves. So where they are in the journey, whether they're recently diagnosed, curious about risks and symptoms, in treatment or living with the disease, they see themselves in the journey and they could find the information that they need. So we are super excited about all this information and especially about all of the research that's happening over the last decade.
Just incredible. I mean, I think that Let's Win, when my husband was diagnosed, it is a wonderful resource, and particularly those patient survival stories. They were really helpful. I mean, just so smart to put them on there. They really give hope in a pretty bleak, diagnosis.
We hope so.
Yeah. So that ambitious idea that you guys came up with, actually, you've outdone yourselves. So Julie, tell us about PanCAN and its 25+ year history.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Alisyn, for doing this and sharing your story, which empowers others. And thank you for your friendship and partnership, and just thrilled to be doing this podcast with Let's Win. So 26 years ago in 1999, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He hadn't been feeling well, stomach pain, back pain, unexplained weight loss, eventually jaundice. Of course, I now know all the symptoms of pancreatic cancer, but back then we didn't know that, and nor did the doctors. And it took quite a while for him to finally be officially diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he died 4 months later. He was 52 years old. And I was devastated. Never had heard of pancreatic cancer, didn't have cancer in our family, and just couldn't believe that this had happened and that we were given no options and no hope. And about that same time, the founder of PanCAN, Pam Acosta-Marquardt, founded the organization. She had lost her mother to the disease, and she and I were connected, and I ended up being hired as the first employee in 2000. So celebrating my 25th year anniversary with the organization. And I've just really watched this community, the pancreatic cancer field, go from absolutely nothing back then to a vibrant, robust, community today. And back then we knew, we needed to empower patients and ensure that they had information and resources so that they could make informed decisions. And we needed to fuel research into this field and find early detection strategies and new treatments for patients. And so that's really what we set out to do. I'm proud that today patients, the 5-year survival rate is 3 times more. Patients will live 3 times longer to 5 years than they would have 25 years ago. But the 5-year survival rate at 13% today is still obviously completely unacceptable, and we have a lot of work to do. But I think the difference is today there's a field, and there are researchers all across this country studying this disease to accelerate progress, and organizations like PanCAN and Let's Win that are providing resources and services to patients.
And so, Julie, give us some real world examples of what you've seen in terms of early detection, progress made, and research, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the biggest change is that there is a field today. Back 25 years ago, you could count on one hand the number of researchers focused on pancreatic cancer. Science follows money. And there was no public funding for pancreatic cancer, and there was no private funding. There were no philanthropists investing money in pancreatic cancer research. So very few institutions had a pancreatic cancer research program. Today, I can say every major medical institution across this country has a pancreatic cancer research program. And that's because funding is now being fueled into the disease. Both federal funding, PanCAN has advocated to increase the federal funding for pancreatic cancer research, and that money doesn't come to PanCAN. It is for the researchers to apply for those dollars, from $17 million back in 1999 to over $220 million today. It's still underfunded for the severity of the disease. But again, we're creating the dollars that are allowing more researchers to go into this field. One of the things PanCAN did in the early days is there were no researchers studying it. And so we said, we're going to fund junior investigators and encourage young people coming into the cancer research field to focus on pancreatic cancer. So to date, I'm really proud that we've funded 130 junior investigators at academic labs all across the country. And some of those that we funded 20 years ago are now the superstars, who have built pancreatic cancer research labs and are now mentoring and fostering the next generation of pancreatic cancer researchers. So all of that, the field is so different and looks so different today. And that's allowing us to really make progress in thinking about early detection strategies and treatment. I think one of the things that maybe is the wildly different today in how we think about how we treat patients is 25 years ago, this was really thought of as a homogeneous disease, that every single pancreatic cancer patient got drug X and that was it, and there was no difference. And we know that that's not true, of course, today, that every pancreatic cancer patient, it's recommended that they get both genetic and biomarker testing of their tumors to determine if there is a targeted drug that would be right for that particular patient. And so I think that's a major shift. And because of that, there have actually been quite a few targeted drugs that have been approved for this disease, maybe helping a small population of pancreatic cancer patients, 1 or 2%. But imagine as we continue to build and 1 to 2% becomes 50%, 60%, as we find more targets and more therapies for patients. So I think that's a great example of, the change in how we even think about this disease. And on the early detection front, there is a lot of work being done. One, to find cancer panel testing that can be used for all cancers, where pancreatic cancer would just be one. You go in, you get a blood test in your annual physical, and it tells you that you might, have a cancer, and it could be any cancer, pancreatic cancer being one of them. So there's a lot of work being done in those kind of panels. None yet that have been proven, across the board, but I think we're getting much closer. And then there's a lot of work being done to better understand what are the early symptoms of pancreatic cancer? Who are the patients that are most at risk that we should be following? As an example, one of the studies that PanCAN is funding is looking at new onset diabetics. And we actually know that new onset diabetes can be an early symptom of pancreatic cancer. We just don't know how to determine which patient is an early symptom of pancreatic cancer and which patient is it just normal diabetes. And so as we finish this test or this study over the next several years, we'll have a better understanding at the end of it of whether that is something that can then be embedded in the healthcare system. You identify someone in an electronic medical record that they have new onset diabetes, and then you take these steps to determine if it might be pancreatic cancer. So we're getting closer. We're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do, but we are much further along than I think we've ever been in terms of really accelerating participation.
That's really heartening to hear. And absolutely early detection is the key
absolutely
to this, because again, pancreatic cancer is so challenging when detected late, as it so often is. And so that leads us to education, Cindy. Why is that important for patients and for their caregivers?
So, knowledge is power. So it was so important with all this great work that was happening 10 years ago to make sure that there was a way to get the education out to the community, and not only to patients and caregivers, but to medical providers. Often so many people are treated in the community, and the doctors are general oncologists, so they're not specialists in this disease. So it's so important that people have access to the latest science. So, Let's was built as an online community, and we are really an online only program. But the truth is we need to get to people and meet them where they are. So, of course, the internet is incredibly powerful. Social media is really important in this space to get to patients. But we need to also partner with trusted messengers to educate them, because not everybody trusts information online. So it's so important for us to partner with other advocacy groups and other faith-based partners, community leaders, so that we make sure that trusted materials get into the hands of the right people. The one thing I mentioned to Julie when we were driving up today was that, when we launched 10 years ago, the survival rate was 5%. And today it's 13%.
When you say 5%, you mean for 5 years?
5 year.
It was 5%, and now it's 13%. You can make it to 5 years.
Yes, the 5-year survival rate today is 13%. But the one thing that I noted was that when we launched at the AACR, the American Association of Cancer Research. They had a special meeting for pancreatic cancer, and I think it was maybe the second meeting. And they had roughly 200 researchers in the room. And now when you go to that meeting, there are nearly 1,000 researchers. So that's 5 times the amount of brilliant minds being focused on this important disease.
So Julie, let's talk about advocacy. So how important is it? And what does it look like right now? Is this like pounding the floors of Congress,
Yes. I don't know that people understand that the majority of cancer research funding in this country comes from the government. The National Institutes of Health is sort of the overarching agency, and then there are about 29 agencies underneath the National Institutes of Health, and the National Cancer Institute is one of those. And that is where the majority of cancer funding comes from, to medical institutions all across the country. Researchers apply, and it's very competitive. So, it's actually a low pay line that actually get funded. But that is where the majority of funding is coming from. That, I would say, is the bread and butter of most labs, and pancreatic cancer labs included. And then philanthropy and organizations like PanCAN and Let's Win help to provide supplemental funding and maybe funding for a specific project, but the bulk of funding really does come from the federal government. So one of the unique things about pancreatic cancer, especially 25 years ago, was we didn't have patients to take up on the Hill and talk about this disease and get mad and raise, their signs. It really had to be the family members that had lost someone. You think about breast cancer movement, and you think about AIDS, right? And all these angry, women who were out there saying, we've got to do something about this. And so in this case, it really had to be the family members of the patients, that had been impacted by pancreatic cancer. So that's what we've done. We go up to Capitol Hill, throughout the year, educating Congress about pancreatic cancer, what it is, why it's, not a great diagnosis, and what needs to be done to change that, and why federal funding is extremely important. And so because of that, the federal funding for pancreatic cancer at the National Cancer Institute has increased by 1,000% over the last, 2 decades. So fairly significant. Again, science follows money. That's why there are more researchers now studying this disease. But I think all of that is in jeopardy today. The recent administration put out their suggested budget for FY26, and it recommends a 37% cut to the National Institutes of Health. That's say it's about $17.5 billion. And so when you think about, and how that will trickle down to then cancer and then pancreatic cancer, it's going to have a significant impact. And so our job right now is to educate Congress about what the impact that's going to have on the local economies. These institutions fuel jobs, and a lot of the states rely on the institutions. It's a major part of their local economy, and then just on the health and well-being of the people that live in this country. So there is still the opportunity for Congress takes the president's budget and then they create their own budget. And so there is still an opportunity to make noise and to advocate and to ensure that Congress understands the impact that this could have. One of the other areas, the federal funding for biomedical research actually comes from the Department of Defense. There is a biomedical research program that funds sort of high-risk, high-reward research. And we were able to advocate with some of our champions in Congress to create a pancreatic cancer program, and that was eliminated this year because of the cuts. So this is real, and it is going to have a real impact immediately on the researchers and their labs, but ultimately on patients. Patients today getting on clinical trials and sort of groundbreaking research, and absolutely patients in the future that haven't been diagnosed yet. So I encourage people, you can go to PanCAN.org, and we have an opportunity for you to write to your member of Congress and tell them why this is important.
Yeah, and time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence.
Yeah, that's great that you make it easy for people to just go to PanCAN.org. Okay, so Julie, tell us about the World Pancreatic Cancer Coalition. What do they do?
Yes. So this was founded in 2016 by a group of us, Cindy, myself, and some other cancer leaders who thought, we're doing all this important work for pancreatic cancer patients and families. How can we come together and ensure that we're collaborating and that we're telling the world that we're here as a force on behalf of this community? So we founded the Pancreatic Cancer World Pancreatic Cancer Coalition, and really we have sort of two priorities. One is to collaborate, network, share ideas and resources so that nobody's having to reinvent the wheel. That doesn't make sense in a tough disease. And then two is to raise awareness about pancreatic cancer globally. And we do that through an annual campaign that happens during November as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month. And in November, we call it World Pancreatic Cancer Day. And we provide tools and materials for all these organizations across the world to really raise awareness about the disease. And so today there are over 100 organizations representing 30 countries that are a part of this coalition. I mean, it's actually amazing. It actually shows you the growth of the field, the fact that there is more money being infused in it. I mean, when PanCAN started, there were no other pancreatic cancer organizations anywhere else in the world. So it's pretty phenomenal, I think, today to see the activity. We need research going on everywhere, not just here in the United States. And it's wonderful to partner with organizations like that.
Do you want to build on that?
Having worked in other cancer spaces, it's been sort of a breath of fresh air in a very, very difficult space to see people be so collaborative. I mean, we need to grow in the same direction. This disease, even today, with a 13% survival rate at 5 years, I mean, it's like pieces of a puzzle. So we all need to sort of come together, learn from each other, share resources, not duplicate effort. And the team has been incredible. So it's been an honor to partner with Julie on the leadership team of the World Pancreatic Cancer Coalition, and to see just the global effort that supports this stuff.
All right, so remind everyone one more time where they can find resources.
Sure. letswinpc.org
and pancan.org.
Ladies, thank you. Thank you very much for this conversation, for your leadership, for all of your investment in this field over the years. It's really great to have people like you working on this. It's very hard thing. So thank you for all of that. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. And make sure you join us in the next episode of PancChat, when we will be looking at the current state of pancreatic cancer treatment and share some exciting new research.